Hello, Sham. How are you? Okay,
Hi.
I was caught in the act. I was dancing away.
Yeah. That's fine. We all know that you do that backstage, and I think some of our viewers also know that you do that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a what do you call this glitch that comes from muscles being very relaxed because I've not been on the show as often as I should have been over the last couple of days. So we had a little bit of I should call it a rehearsal because I put everything on and we went live before we actually went live. Right. So hi everyone, good evening, welcome back to a new episode on leadership in Flow Asia. Nasha is going to tell us a little bit about why what leadership in Flow is Asia is. What is this show about? And I'll shut up for a while and make sure that we've got the back
No,
end covered. Okay.
no worries. Thank you, Sham. Thank you, Sham. This is Ashok from Singapore, covering leadership in Flow Asia. And ladies and gentlemen, if you just noticed, Sham just demonstrated the artful way of doing digital Tai Chi. Where she said, Ashok will now tell you more about leadership in Flow Asia. All right, welcome to Leadership in Flow Asia. What is this show about? We've been having this show since 2022, where we have been having a lot of conversations, important conversations with leaders within Asia. The reason for that is we have noticed that the leaders from Asia, they kind of think and do things very differently. In fact, we've coined them as quiet leaders, but impactful leaders. And what we have unearthed from them over time is the three areas that they always look into: their personal growth, their leadership growth, and the business growth. And it's always been very interesting how things together to become a very impactful leader and quiet ones at the same point of time. So that's
Hmm.
Leadership in Flow Asia for you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our edition in July, where we're going to be talking about influence for sustainable change.
Hmm.
Sham,
And
now for me
yeah,
to digital Tai
I
Chi
just
use
wanted
to
to add because I had a recent, very interesting conversation with a this crew that helps us to create our blog, not create the blogs, but edit the blogs and make sure that we've
Okay.
got it right. Between quiet leader and introverted leaders, and I thought it would be a good one to kind of start us off because it I think would lead into our subject for this evening.
Okay.
Personally, I don't think quiet here in the quiet leader has anything to do with introversion or extroversion.
Yep.
As you said, Ashok, we define our hypothesis about the quiet leader is this is a person who introspects, who does thinking, who reflects and looks at both successes and failures in a way, in a context of growth and for either themselves, their team, or for the business that they're leading, right? Or the function that they are leading. So I thought that would be a nice way for us to now, keeping that in mind, to look at that space that we're going to discuss today, which is influence, right?
Okay.
There's sustainable change, but I think it's driven by the fact that we're going to look at influence specifically and from the context of change and how to make that sustainable. Right? Why influence, Ashok? I think that's probably something that people are asking and wondering. Why influence? And my take on it this is my take on it. My
Sure.
take on it is that influence was, coming off on ATD 24. That was one of the, while it may have been talked about most specifically in some of the sessions, in other sessions I think it was for me the underlying theme around growth and change, that we have to look at how we can influence that for ourselves, how
Hmm.
we can create that for ourselves, right? And in more recent weeks, it's been the work that we have recently done, or Muller has recently done, with a consulting client around their leadership development, and where influence is a component that was put into that program or that series of programs, because it is something I think the firm sees as a key component, a behavior component that the leaders need, both for their technical part, the hard part of their work, or the
Sure.
technical part of their work, as well as the people part of their work. That's my take on it. Your thoughts, Ashok?
No, it is accurate. It's accurate in that sense because I'm looking at the challenges the leaders are having today. You know,
Mm, mm,
why influence is even more important. So I like to start off with that first, right? So I
okay.
like to set the definition of leadership influence first. And
Mm,
then let's cast it down. Now, when I talk about leadership influence, I like to lean on a quote from the sixth president of USA. I'm trying to
okay.
show off here a bit,
Yeah, yeah,
John
yeah.
Quincy Adams, right?
Okay.
Where he has mentioned this, and this is a quote that I love, and I love to quote it all the time. It says here, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader."
Mm,
Okay, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader. Of
mm,
course, I see that in two facets, whether as a personal leadership or as a leader who influences many, right? So in this
mm.
context, I'm looking at a leader who influences many. So I'm starting off from that definition itself. And then when I
Okay.
look at that definition and I look at today's business environment, it has become even more important for leaders to be very conscious of how they show up and how they are influencing people. Because
Mm,
what I'm noticing, right, in also the various conversations I'm having with leaders and workshops I'm having with leaders, there is a new pressure. Why am I saying new? It has always been there, but it's new added pressure. In
mm,
the last 4 years, as you all we know, we have gone through a lot of changes, and things are moving so quick and fast in that sense. And today, I'm noticing a lot of leaders are grappling with one factor:
mm,
time.
mm.
Time.
Yep.
Because suddenly they've got to take on either new roles, they've got to drive new strategies, they've got to look for their revenues, and they've got to do it with less resources, and they've got to do it quickly. So I'm looking at the fact that the time is really compressed for them.
Mm,
And in this period, how do they then use time effectively and influence their teams?
mm.
Right. So that's
Yes.
where I see where influence is going to be extremely important in this day and age, right? Because even if you
Mm,
Sham, if you think about it, what has been happening is now we are hearing certain governments are slowly trying to nudge work from home and what have you got, right?
mm.
And the scale or scope of working and leading people is changing again, right? So
Yep.
adding on to all of these factors, right? We are looking at it and say, hey, leaders, they've got more on their plates today,
Mm,
and what we are saying is they need to be very conscious of how they influence. They need to be very clear about how they are influencing or what they are influencing. So that's where I'm coming from. And I agree with you for what you shared earlier, right? About what Muller was saying about adding this element into leadership workshops and all that. I can see the importance today, right?
yes. I think we'll cycle back to this or circle back to it, depending on which word you want to use, um, to this idea that sometimes I find that many of us, many out there, find that discomfort with the word influence.
Mm,
All right, and it could be because it's maybe seen all that fine line between influence and manipulation.
perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah,
I totally
and
get it.
yeah, so I think that's probably something that we also may have to kind of be aware of, that people tend to put the two in the same basket. All
Okay.
right. But of course, I have to say, as Matthew McConaughey said, what's wrong with influence? What's wrong with manipulation if it's good manipulation? But we'll cycle and circle back to this later. We've got
Okay.
important things to cover.
Mhm.
Before we do that, I need to do two things. One is to say hi to Ashraf. Ashraf has joined us online via LinkedIn. So, hello, welcome to the show, Ashraf. Please interact with us, ask the questions, or make comments. Feel free to do that. And for anyone else who's listening in and tuning in from other channels as well. That's the first thing. The second thing is, there you go. Miss Muller has come on board. All right. And we put the two of us in our rightful places and
No,
put
no,
Ashok
no.
his
Put it
rightful
in the center.
place.
Put it in the center. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be
Yeah,
put
okay,
in the
Manju,
spotlight.
but you just have to live with the spotlight. We have influenced you to be in the spotlight. Now, on that note, hi, Malari, you want to say hello to everyone before we start? Proper, and tell us why you're so tardy.
Well, welcome. Thanks for having me in the show, even though it's 10 minutes or 13 minutes into the show. Well, as you know, I was running a program and I finished exactly at 6 o'clock. But because I'm so lovable, people wouldn't let me go until 10 minutes ago. Okay.
Okay. We will find out what we'll unpack how that lovable came about. But on that note, let's move on. Ashok, you let me know when you want to put up the stuff that you
Oh, yeah,
shared.
I'll come to that. But I like to address what you mentioned earlier, Sham, about the thin line between manipulation and influence. And I think that's a very important fact that you brought up because, yes, there is a thin line. And what sits in between the thin line
Mm,
is intentions.
mm,
So that
mm,
is why you can say what's wrong with manipulation as long as you're very clear about the intentions behind it. And that's what it flows back to leaders again. If you want to create sustainable change, it comes back to what's your intention behind that influence. And that is
mm.
why in history, right, if you look at it, there's been good influence and bad influence, right? There are case studies out there. For I mean, case in point, if we all know about Steve Jobs, how he managed to, with his leadership, right? He was a symbol of influence, how he created a lot of influence within his organization in different
Mm,
groups and all that in different ways. So that's a very good example of it. But don't
mm.
forget, on the flip side, about 24 years back, we've had the Enron case, if you remember right, you know,
Yep.
where the leaders were now forging all the financial reports and, and the
Yep.
financial statements and what have you got. And that is also an influence. That's leadership influence also. So
Mm.
we need to be clear there is good and bad influence, if I can put it as simply as possible. But the thin
Yep.
line that you talked about is the intentions. So going back to the intention, if your intention is to help people dream more, do
Mm.
more, learn more, and become more, then what's wrong with that influence? So that's, I just want to tell people who are wondering, oh, is influence a bad thing? Say, no, go back to your intentions and
Mm.
lean on that quote that I was talking about. At least for me, I do that, you know. That's why I see influence is very strong. Malari, you wanted to say something? Yes, she does want
I
to say
wanted to
something.
put up my hand. I wanted to put out my hand, but then I realized, okay, I need to behave myself. Um,
Mm.
Actually, for me, I'm glad you brought the idea of intention. So the way I differentiate influence by intention is you influence or you manipulate. The difference in manipulation and influence for me, like what you rightly say, is intention. So how do we differentiate intention? Because you'd find that a lot of people say, but I intended well, I meant it well, I had good intentions for this, right?
Mm.
But the way for me it works is this, right? Do I manipulate? Of course I do. I've caught myself manipulating, all right, and I'm saying that shamelessly here. Now the difference is when you are trying to influence, there is a benefit for both people. It's a win-win. So I might be trying to influence you. I can gain something out of it, but you're surely gaining something of it. But when I manipulate, right, I am looking at it as my interest, sometimes at the expense of your loss. So you'd
Mm.
find that when you say, for example, you manipulate people into taking on additional work, additional tasks. And this is a big thing in leadership.
She's gone frozen, but no
Gone
worries.
frozen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I
So
don't know whether you can hear me. Can you hear me? Right?
Yes, I can
So
hear you now.
can hear. Okay. So when we think about manipulation, right? So a lot of times you will find that organizations or leaders now don't have enough resources. So what do I need to do? I need to use the power of my influence to influence you to take on what is not in your job description.
Yeah.
Now, influence is really important because really everyone is having the same problem where we lack resources, right? But if I am trying to get you to do additional tasks for my benefit, for me to look good
Mm.
with my, yeah, at the expense of you losing your well-being, right?
Okay.
At the expense of me making you feel insecure.
Mm.
If you don't take on this additional thing, it's really going to affect, your role here, right? And I've seen bosses using these lines, right? Then we are manipulating. All right,
Okay.
that's the only thing I want to. Okay.
No, no,
So
that's fine. That
to
that 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 yeah, that really gives us a good anchor again. Thank you
yeah.
for the clarity. Sorry, Sham, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to summarize it. So I'm seeing two things. One is the intention, and number two, well, cause effect. I'm not sure, or it could be two separate things. One is intention, and the other one being the results, the share of the results, right? The effects. So is it a win-win, or is it a win not care? Right, in negotiations we talk about that, right? I win. As long as I win, I don't care how you feel, whether it's a win for you or a loss for you. I don't care where you feel,
Mm.
right? So that can give us the intention leads to the results or it's two things at play that kind of helps us distinguish between influence and manipulation, right? i think
Right.
i think that kind of sets the stage and the rhythm and the momentum for us to go a little bit more deeper into the key challenges, right, that leaders today face in today's leadership, that where influence will matter, where
Mm-hmm.
needing to have that skill, that the ability to do that, right? And to do that well, to do that with intention, and to do that with joint results.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are those some? What in your mind are those key challenges that today's leadership find that if I knew this, if I know how to do this, it will help me overcome, not overcome, but deal with it in a slightly easier way with my well-being being taken care of.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think the first step is like what I was mentioning earlier, Sham. I think one of the biggest issues most leaders are facing today is the time. You know,
Mm,
they've got such limited time, and they
mm,
have now got to deliver so much more within that limited time. They've got to take on so much more changes, put on new roles. They've got to
mm,
drive the resilience in their groups. They have got to be equitable in their approach. There's so much more on their plates today with that squeeze in time. So today, what I'm seeing is time is the biggest factor that is really compressing. There's a biggest challenge, right? So
mm,
my concern is with that time, would you also then drop what is important for you as a leader? Would you drop the values? How would you see driving the performance of your people?
mm,
Because there's a pressure of time, and now you've got new compressed results that you've got to deliver in quick time. But how do you now then approach your people who could be working from home? You've got different aspects of different people, different demographics. So how do you now get the best performance from them in an equitable manner? Right. So these are some of the challenges I'm seeing. Malad, are you seeing anything that on your end that leaders are grappling with?
Oh gosh.
Where can I start with it?
I'm yeah, right. Actually, one of those things that I think we leaders undermine the power of influence or take it for granted.
Yep.
So I see two parts of it, right?
Mhm.
I think one part is we take it for granted that if we are leaders, we assume we have influence. So taking it for granted.
mm,
Mhm.
The opposite of that I see in leaders is very much not. They think that everything is logical,
Mm.
Yeah.
right? Which means that, right? Which means that they think that, so do they undermine the power of influence. So how do they undermine the power of influence? I go into a meeting, I I want someone to volunteer. I think people will volunteer.
Mm.
I want ideas, right? And ideas
Mm.
to be implemented. I think because this is part and parcel of our day to day, someone will take it up, right? What I don't think about in between these spaces is that people are probably struggling because I could have an idea. And one of the common things that come out in almost every other organization meeting that we talk about is, if I put up my hand and give an idea, I
Um,
volunteer to implement the idea.
Correct.
And while I don't mind implementing the idea or owning the idea, I don't have the resources. I don't have the energy. Okay. I'm not going to get help. And I don't even know whether I'm going to be successful. And I know that if I put up my hand and take on the idea and execute the idea, if the idea fails, then the failure belongs to me. Now, these are issues and questions and challenges that people are experiencing, and they're not able to talk about it, because if you talk about it, then you are labeled as negative, you're
Mm.
labeled as pessimistic, you're labeled as not being professional. So there, you're not having growth mindset is another thing. Anything people don't do, you don't have the growth mindset, because if you have the growth mindset, right?
You
So
take it on.
yeah, to take it on. So there are so many labels that's put onto people, that to a point, I think there's a lot of fear. We talk about psychological safety, right? So we don't feel safe enough to have an open mind, right? Because you cannot influence people when people are close minded,
Mm.
right? And the first thing that we do in the spectrum is, what are the kind of things, how do I need to show up so that I can open people's mind to entertain an idea, a thought, a belief that I have. Once people are open to entertaining an idea, the next part is for them to speak up. When they speak up, this is where we might have what typically we call conflicts, right? Therein lies, right, when there's a conflict, when people are disagreeing and arguing, that is your best opportunity to influence, because here people are vulnerable to tell you why I'm not on your side. You now have an opportunity to explain your idea, to sell and get the buy-in for your idea, and as a result you would have influenced people, right? So I think we
Mm.
undermine, there's a lot of undermining of how much influence actually matters. All right. When we talk to people, and we don't even have to talk to people professionally, right? A lot of times, right, when you talk to people and say, who's your hero? A lot of us will point out as at our parents, at the kind of things they've influenced us, by the way they have lived their life, by the things that they've told us, by the advice that they have given us. These are some things that you will never park under influence, but they have great influence, right? Because
Mm.
they opened up our mind, they continue to drum in certain values, certain beliefs, certain purpose in us over and over again. And we go back to that when we are confused. We go back to these things when we need clarity. So a lot of times influence is not packaged as influence.
Mm.
Influence is packaged as, someone convinced me he or she is my role model. When I have an idea, when I have a problem, this is the person I think about. You know how we think about who's your mentor? What would Ashok do about this? What would Shamini do about this? But the fact that I'm thinking, what would Shamini do or Ashok do, that means you already have an influence on me. Okay, I said more than what I wanted to say.
No, 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 no. Please carry on. No, please, please. No, you're making a lots of sense here because two things that we are hearing from you is leadership is undermined and it's not really well
Influence
thought
in
through.
leadership is
Yeah. And the other one is
influence in
people,
leadership.
yeah. And the other one is people take it for granted. Leaders take it for granted, you know? So I hear that very clearly. And it's assumed that as a leader, there will be influence. And what you correctly put forth is exactly what is happening in a lot of organizations. A leader has an idea, he puts it out there, and then but then and then he's not willing, or he or she is not willing to entertain the debates, the dissent, the discussions. He just wants to just push his way through, you know. And that's where the psychological safety issues comes from, because people don't feel safe challenging, people don't feel safe asking questions, right? And like I said,
Mm.
that is a clear opportunity to be able to influence, but they fail in that area, or they drop that opportunity. So that is one clear example of how we're not seeing the power of influence, because we assume, or it is undermined in its many ways, you know. Yeah. I
Mm.
don't know, thank you for that, the clarity in
Can I
that sense. Sure.
can I add one more? As you're talking to me, right? One of those things that I feel, right? I think there's fear of influence
Conscious,
because
unconscious.
uh, I think it's conscious. I
Okay.
think it's conscious now. I'm thinking about it, right? Now, what do I mean by fear of influence? Do you realize that sometimes when you're asking opinion, there's this loud movement where we feel that we need to empower people to make their own choices and decision,
Hmm.
and we throw it back to them because we think or we believe that I should not influence you in your thoughts. Some people hold it, I don't know whether you recognize it, right? Like when people are seeking opinion, you'll say, what do you think? That's And sometimes people do this because they're so used to coaching questions, or they're drummed about coaching. Now,
Hmm.
on one hand, yes, people need to make the choices themselves. But a lot of us, I don't know about you, right? A lot of times I wish I had a roadmap to make those choices. Influence is actually providing the roadmap that we have that might work for you to find what works for you. So, in the name of empowerment, in the name of independence, we give people a blank sheet and say, create your road. It
Mm,
will not work for everybody. And
mm,
this is why influence can be so powerful, because you are now saying, hey, these are things that's worked for me. Have you thought about that? Have you got this fact? Have you got this information? You challenge people. I mean, Sham is in our team. Sham is really very good. When you put out an idea, she will think of something that none of us thought about, right? When she challenges it. Now, she influences us by challenging us. She doesn't influence us by telling us what to do or how to
mm.
do it. Just us to answer her challenge, you don't realize she's influenced you to think like her, to walk the path that she knows,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing now is, okay. So the first thing we are having clarity around this influence is, number one is about the intentions. Now the second one, from what you have just mentioned, if I can summarize, is the leaders need to be very conscious of how they influence, because they are influencing, but are they conscious about it? Are they self-aware of how they show up, what they're saying, what they're doing, and how each action has an influence, has an impact, and is it very clear to them? So one is the intentions, one is the conscious choice. Are you very clear? Are you self-aware of how you are showing up? That's the two things I picked up so far
Mm.
about influence, and it's extremely important. Sham.
Um, Nothing but to segue. I think that's a good segue for us to get into the sources of influence, right? Because I
Mm,
think the sources of influence, uh, in a way, helps us or will help us understand how influence shows up. What do we hear and see when someone is influencing, aside from the very,
Sure.
uh, not the structure, but this is the definition of influencing when someone is pitching an idea to you.
Sure.
All right. So yeah, that is one, but
Mm,
that is not the only way that influence shows up, right?
mm, mm,
And I
mm.
think it's good for us to get into that space right
Okay.
now. Give us some time to unpack that, discuss that, give some examples around that area,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Should I bring up the PDF?
Sure. Let's look at that.
Okay.
One of mother's
Um,
favorite model framework.
and as usual, we always love models. We are the trio of models and frameworks. So let me add that in, and here comes the framework. Okay, talk to us.
I like to
I
say, can
should.
you do that again? Can you do that again?
No, no, it's a one-time deal only. Don't know whether how to repeat. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, not sure.
so this is the influencer change framework. This is from the book itself, Influencer: The New Science of Leading Change. Right. So in there, what they've done is, I thought they did a pretty good job of taking something quite complex in a way and putting forward in a very simple model, but not simplified, or
Hmm.
simplistic, but a simple model for us to understand. So if I'm going to go with a vertical columns first, right? If you think about it, Sham, vertical,
No, no,
vertical,
vertical this way. Yeah, yeah. I have to
vertical.
calibrate. Yeah.
This is horizontal. Okay, so
Uh,
vertical, right? If you think about it, Sham, right? If I'm to ask you, in the last few years, have you picked up a new skill?
Don't ask a trainer's question like that in front of everybody. It's
Answer
like,
is yes, lah, because you taught
yeah,
me a
you
lot of things,
cannot say
ma.
yes. Yeah, okay, yes. All right.
I know because you taught me a lot about this, virtual learning and and all that space. So to me, that was a new.
Okay,
I
okay. That's
learned a
my
lot.
answer. Virtual learning. How to do training online. Okay,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, you taught me that. So yeah, I know you did. Okay, so anyway, and you were learning and you were teaching. So that
Hmm.
if I look at it, right, if you think about it, let's look at motivation first. There was a motivation behind why you wanted to do it. The reason
Yeah.
why we do anything is because we have the motivation
Hmm.
and we have maybe some level of ability or the confidence to pick up the ability. So motivation and ability are the vertical sides.
Hmm.
So if I look at source one, personal motivation, you had the personal motivation to want to learn this, a new skill. So if you think about it, why we learn any new thing, like in your instance, right? Whatever the pressure was, right? On virtual learning and all that, there was a motivation behind it. I know myself, I've never done it before, never I heard about it, but never delved into it. But I made the undesirable desirable in a sense because trying to understand how can I become better, how can I add value, and what is the purpose behind it, so there was a lot of motivation. Then comes the ability, right? How do you now pick up your skills along that way? So it's personal motivation, personal ability. That's source two. How do you now pick up new skills or improve your current skills to be able to do it well? So if you think about it, Sham, when you were doing your virtual learning, right?
Hmm.
You were slowly but surely picking up your skills. You were
Of course.
practicing it
Hmm.
deliberately. You would have spent a few hours, X number of hours per day, trying to learn things and learn more about it, actually physically working on it and all. So
Hmm.
that's your ability that you're picking up.
Hmm.
Then if you look at the next one, there was a group of people that you lean towards. That's your social motivation.
All right.
There was a group of people, social motivation, who were providing you with additional motivation, information, guidelines, and
Hmm.
leading you along the path. So that is your social motivation. Now, the social motivation may have been physical people that you've been with. It could be books that you've read. It could be on YouTube that you were linking up with, whichever it is, right? But there was that social component, others, right? And then if you look at source four, social ability, finding strengths in numbers is about not just one person, but a group of people who are practicing it.
Hmm.
Because we learn from a bigger group. We get enabled by a bigger group. We get motivated, to even do more through a bigger group. Yeah. So that's finding strength in numbers. That's your social ability,
Mm.
right? So you got personal, social, and the next one is structural. So everything non-human in that sense, right? So structural motivation, uh, it's think about designing rewards recognition. Is that think
Mm.
everything around rewards and recognition. So
Mm.
if you think about it, uh, you may have structured or may have consciously, unconsciously, I don't know, given yourself a little reward for doing well in certain learnings on how you did well as you picked up your virtual learning. It could be like yes, or it could be like taking a meal or whatever, or sharing the happiness with someone else. You have done that, right? But in a corporate, we'll talk about that soon, how we can do that. And a structural ability is how you tracked using different tools, whether through your Excel spreadsheets or doing different tools to see how you are progressing, how you're learning faster, or maybe you want Google classrooms and all that with different people and tracking what your learnings are, whichever it is, but you were monitoring your progress with different type of tools,
Mm.
right? So that's your structural ability. So we have done it at a personal level. If you think about it, right? Whenever we want to learn anything new, we have unconsciously used this six sources. But now we have got a language around it.
Mm.
And this can even be used in organizations as long as leaders are very clear about the change they want to make. So if I look at it from a change point of view, from an
Mm.
organization, right? Yes, the change has to be communicated. But when you talk about source one, right? Source one, personal motivation, it is very important for leaders to also understand how will the users benefit from it. How do I link the purpose to the organization values? How do I communicate that? That is an important link because you could be changing a person's role, but you need to link it back to something that is meaningful, purposeful in
Mm.
that sense, right?
Okay.
And what if the person does not have the full competency? How are you going to provide that competency to learn, to become better? How do you harness the social, source 3 and source 4, the learning circles or the group of people or the community, right? To be able to provide more information or even have the right group of people who are already the practitioners and moving forward, and how we can learn from them. What are best practices? What needs to be done on a day-to-day basis, right? And then structural motivation could be about designing rewards. Okay, all the time I tell organizations do not focus on monetary rewards. Let's think about non-monetary rewards, you know, recognizing in different ways. And then, of course, changing the environment. Source 6 is about how do you have posters or digital way of tracking the progress and informing everyone how we are doing, rewarding the small wins, celebrating small wins, even from a digital point of view or as a group point of view in source 4. So, I mean, giving you a rough idea of how we can use these six sources to be able to influence behaviors. Yeah. So that is influencer change framework that we can leaders can lean towards, right? As they try and make some changes. Yeah, you're going to say something, Sham.
Yeah, I'm thinking, so how as a leader would I use this framework, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that if I am if I'm looking at the change at a personal level, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at the personal bit, the number one and number two, right? So I'm want to influence Muller, or I want to bring about influence at a personal level. Then I need to focus and draw or build my source from one and two, or is that how I think about it? If I'm looking at a team, I want to influence my team, then I'm going to look at harnessing the peer pressure as a way of influence, or get as many people on my side as a way, another source of influence. Is that Is that how we read this framework?
Okay, so a couple of questions down there. All right, so let's break up the first one first. In a one-on-one conversation where you're trying to influence one person, yeah, you can use the six sources. Understanding first is source one. The person needs to be motivated, inspired about wanting to make that change. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen to link to the person's values and the impact for that whatever change you're talking about, right?
Mm.
So that's at a personal level. So then you can talk about this through a personal level if you're having a one-on-one discussion, right? Where you're trying to help a person improve their performance and all. This is a conversation that you can use, or this six horses is something that you can identify to see what is there and what is lacking. Is the person lacking a certain type of training? Of course, I would say the first thing you always must focus on is source one. There must be a level of inspiration, motivation to wanting to do this in the first place, right? So that's your first part of the question. Now, if you're looking at it in a team basis, if you want the whole team, right? Again, the same thing works. The whole team needs to be personally motivated, or they need to understand why this change, let's talk about change, is important,
Mm.
right? So
Mm.
therefore, as a team, they need to understand. And in a team, it's not so much about their personal motivation, but it's a lot of it is linked to the purpose, the inspiration of the organization, the purpose of the organization. So they need to see the link between the change and the impact that they have in line with the purpose of the organization. So that's the
Mm.
conversation that needs to happen. Then the question is, okay, I'm asking you to change your role now or enhance your role. Do you have the competency? What am I going to do about enhancing that competencies? So that needs to be put in place, right? And then
Mm.
the social, I wouldn't say so much of a pressure, but how do you get the good examples in the community, in the group, to be able for people to role model, to learn
Mm.
from, provide more information. So then you're using that peer from a positive influence point of view. Yeah. And of course, as a team, you can think about different ways of coming up with Source 5. Now, one organization I worked with, I just love their Source 5. They called it "Catch Me Doing Right." Okay,
Oh.
what I mean by that, yeah, exactly. Because more often not, there's a kind of bias, a tendency where we try and catch people doing wrong, right? But this organization, what they did was they told all the leaders and the individual contributors, we need to focus on if someone does something right, we need to shout out and tell the whole world,
Mm.
right? So it's catch me doing right. So that's source
Mm.
5. So they structured it differently from a source 5 point of view. And then from a source 3 and 4, everybody was doing it and everybody was talking about it. And they used source 6 in terms of broadcasting it through email, digital, whatever communication platforms that they have. But it stemmed from source 5 in how they shifted catch me doing right. So it gives you an example, of
Yep.
if you so if you're having a one-on-one conversation or coaching someone, right, in that sense, then you look into this six sources and see which areas you need to ask more questions on and identify which is strong in or weaker in, and then we can come up with solutions along it.
Mm.
So does that
Okay.
answer some of the questions?
Yep, yep. I think it does. It gives a nice overview. I'm going to say hello to Anup G. Nair. And Anup has asked a question. So I think that's a nice follow through to that question I just asked you, right? Or we're actually kind of taking it into a bigger macro area. So Anup's question is, what are the ethical considerations leaders must keep in mind when promoting sustainable change? Big one.
No, no, no. Actually, this Muller had expounded and talked a lot about it earlier, right?
Mm,
I think the most important one is about the intentions behind, right?
mm.
What are the ethical
So you're
considerations?
linking
Yeah, yeah,
ethics to intention.
definite, is it?
Hmm.
Because yes, I want to do good, but am I very clear about is it going to be helping my team and myself and the organization? You know,
Mm.
in that sense. So I'm linking it back. So Muller had talked about it. Unless Muller, you want to add on anything else for Anu? Because that to me that is a clear direction. As a leader, the clarity must be there. You know, the social awareness must be there about why am I doing what I'm doing and how is it going to benefit everyone as much as possible.
Mm.
Yes, Muller.
Um, so actually, I'm thinking as looking at Anup's question. Anup, you've asked a very difficult question actually, but thank you.
Mhm.
What I'm reading, and I'm not sure whether I've understood the question correctly, is that he's asking what are the ethical consideration leaders must keep in mind when promoting sustainable change, right? Uh,
Mm.
and because he's asking the question in this topic, which is influence for sustainable change, so I'm trying to first connect the two parts, right? So
Mm.
this is a change model, and if you want change to work, we know the reason most change fails is because of the people factor, because people don't believe in it in the first place, right? For people to believe in it, now
You
what
need
does
insight.
yeah, the influencer model says that the six sources of influence. When they come together, the chances of us sustaining the change is very, very high, right? So I think that's the point of view that where we're coming from. Now,
Yep.
what Anup is asking is, so what I'm understanding from Anup's question, Anup, please correct us, is that in using these six sources of influence, what are the ethical consideration is what I'm thinking. I don't know
Let's
whether
go
I'm
with that.
reading.
Yeah.
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 So if
Understood.
those are the ethical considerations. So what I'm looking at is values, right? So if I
Mm.
look at source one, for example, right, make the undesirable desirable, right? Now, when we talk about make the undesirable a desirable, again, I think this is where the intentions would come in, because when you're
Mm.
making an undesirable desirable, are you manipulating or influencing? This undesirable, to make it desirable, what is the value that it is actually promoting? Same thing with surpass your limits, right? When you talk about you can do more, I think there's a lot of shout out about you can do more, right?
Mm.
We are all expected to do more, growth mindset, and you can do more. But when we talk about you can do more, at what expense? What is the price of doing more? Is it your well-being? So my understanding of sustainable change, now I can't remember where who I took it from, is let's not steal from the future to sustain and look great presently. That's
Let's not
the
steal from the future to look
yeah,
great. To look
yeah,
great present in the
yeah,
present. Yeah.
in the present,
Now.
right?
Um,
So if you why are we looking at sustainability now? Because what we are doing is we want to have greater profits, we want to build big businesses, we want to do everything in a big scale. When you're doing things in a big scale, you need a lot of resources. When you need these resources, are we taking the resources that's required from today or from tomorrow? Because I can look very successful today, but what is the world I leave behind tomorrow? If I leave the world behind tomorrow, worse, I have stolen from the future. And
mm.
if you look at ESG and all the sustainable SDG goals, right, it is really about being mindful. I want to grow, I want to do it well and ethically so that we do not leave the future in a negative state for the world. Because what we if you steal from the future, right, what's going to happen with the people who come after us, right? We're going to give them a destructed world, right? Which is why, so if I'm using papers, if I plant enough trees, I am taking from the current resources while providing resources for the future too, right? That's the most my simple understanding of what is sustainability, why sustainability is important. So if all of us ask this question, right? I'm growing, I'm becoming better, I'm successful, I'm doing all of this, right? But is the are the people in the future going to pay the price? I'm going to reap the benefits, but the cost is postponed to the future. So, what are the ethical consideration? I think when we are using all of this six influences, there are two parts, right? If you look at the motivation is the energy people put in to do more, to do better, right? You need the motivation, but we have seen how motivation can be manipulated because emotions can be manipulated,
Mhm.
right? Emotions are energy, right? So when people are motivated, they have a different level of emotion that drives them, that makes them do more. I mean, think about a mother who's motivated to carry the car to save her child. It's that moment of excellence where she's driven by emotions at that moment, right? But if it's used for the right reason, it's fine. So I think Anup asked a very important question. We want to change, we want to influence change, but is that influence ethical? Right?
Mm.
Ethical means what? Is it value centric? How do we know something is value centric? When it's good for us and for the earth overall, right? So it
Mm.
cannot just be us. So we are doing an ecological check. So every time we make a choice and a decision, we're doing an ecological check. Is it good for me? Is it good for everybody else? Is it good for us now? Is it good for them tomorrow? I think
Yeah.
those are two ethical
Yeah, good
questions.
questions to have. Yeah. And I think if you take it more, if you take it down a notch in terms of becoming a little bit micro, right? Right. As opposed to the earth. Is it good for us now? Are we pushing ourselves or pushing our teams to a level that's not good for their well-being, such that you have high attrition rates, right? Such that the high attrition rates then gives you a bad rep in the market, that you're not able to acquire the talents that you need to grow the organization, right? To grow the business. So are we doing what's good for us now without keeping in mind, is it going to be useful for us in the future as an organization? So from a leader's perspective, you can also look at that, right? So it's a cycle that maybe we don't consider because right now we are short term, right?
Yeah.
We have short term lenses, right? We look at it and say we need to get this job done. The KPI has been given. Let's do it. Then we push it. We get the KPI. A higher KPI comes onto our brain, or a more stretchy KPI comes to it. All right, because you proved it. That's the nature of the beast, right? And how then do we think about it, right, from an ethical perspective? That's more at the organizational team level. Anup says, thanks. This has helped me to clear my concepts and perception towards this scenario. In addition to when promoting sustainable change, leaders must make decisions based on ethical rather than
Yes.
purely financial considerations. Yes. And also ethical principles that encompass not just the people, I think. Well, that's essentially the core of ethics anyway. This includes weighing the long-term benefits of sustainability against short-term profits and considering the broader impact of their action. Very nicely summarized. Anup, you did our job for us. Well done. Please keep an eye out for Anup. Maybe he's a potential
Right.
host
I,
that we
I
might.
like to I just like to I know we got about 4 to 5 more minutes. I just like to very quickly share a true story that happened that probably captures the six horses and what Anup is talking about also. Right. So I'm going to go back to about 1990s. This is in Vietnam. Right. This is in Vietnam where Save the Children were invited to come to Vietnam to help with the malnutrition issues for the children in Vietnam who are below 5 years old. So Jerry's turn in and wife Monique's turn in, right? They were with Save the Children Vietnam office. Now the interesting part of it is they were given, because the Vietnamese regulators have been hearing from so many organizations about, oh, we got to save the children, we got to look after the nutritions, and they've come up with all this plan, but all of it has failed, right? So they said, okay, we give you 6 months, get it done. So Jerry was, what? 6 months? I can't do it in 6 months. To set up an exam, to set up an office really will take me 9 months or so. How can I do it in 6 months? So what he did was he very quickly left his office in the city and went to the village. So he walked around the village and he started looking for malnutrition kids, but children who were slightly different. So in a way, he was looking for slightly pouchier children, not so
Mm,
malnourished, right?
mm,
And he found them. Then he went and asked the village, I want to speak to the mother. What is she doing differently? Right? So she went and interviewed the mother and then found out that the mother, just like the whole village, they're all given rice. In the whole village, everyone takes rice in the morning and night. But this mother, what she did was she took the same amount of rice, gave it for morning, lunchtime, and dinner time. Over and above that, what this mother did was went to the paddy field, picked up small shrimps and crabs, put it inside, put sweet potato leaves inside as a form of nutrition and
mm.
enhance the nutrition bit. So what he found was there was someone or a group of people who were doing things differently. So this is called positive deviance. So
Mm.
in an organization, if you want to make change, also look for the people who are doing things differently. So if you want to create a sustainable change, look at it from an ethical point of view, who are doing things differently and correctly. And then what he did was then he said, okay, since there is someone from the village who's doing it right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a certain training room in that village where he got the mother to come forward and started to teach every one of the mothers in that village on how to prepare this meal with the shrimps, the crabs, the sweet potato leaves, and all that. So that's your social motivation ability, the harness of it all teaching together. And they will pass a course when they can create a very nutritional meal. And in that way, he was able to create a sustainable change where children's malnutrition issues fell and children became healthy in the long term. So he had used aspects of the six sources, but focusing on positive deviation as an important concept to identify the right behavior. So I hope
Correct.
that can
And
help you. I,
and I'm going to tie that back to the quiet leaders, right?
mm,
That's essentially what quiet leaders do. They find that what positive deviation, right? They do things a little bit differently in their quiet way, and they find a way of getting to deviate from the norm and create results. Malar, go ahead. You have another example. We had a Vietnam example. You have something from Malaysia. By the way, I have before you ask me, I do not have anything for Singapore, but never mind. You go ahead. All right. Okay. All right. Flexibility, you said. Example on
Okay.
flexibility.
Now, I wanted to share because I mean, Anup, thank you. He's activated my brain and my heart, right? So yesterday I had the privilege of moderating a session on flexible work, right? Um,
Mm,
and what was really interesting is I was moderating the HR head of Kereta Api Tanah Melayu, our train, yeah,
yep.
station, and SME Bank, right? So here I was actually moderating with two people because we know that well, at least in Malaysia, flexibility is the number two factor for people to take on a job,
Mm, mm,
right? So we were discussing it. So naturally, I went in with this assumption, oh, okay, these people are very much pro, hybrid work and stuff like that. Now, what was interesting is both the organizations are very cautious about hybrid work.
mm,
They believe in flexibility, but they don't think hybrid work will be sustainable. Now, why? What they were very clear about is this, like KTM, when he was talking, he said, the nature of work, we need you to be here. Very
mm,
simple. The
mm,
SME bank, they said their customers are SME business owners who are not tech savvy, who don't want to be that tech savvy yet. And their
mm,
job is to serve these customers.
mm,
Number three, one of those things that they brought up was brought up by SME Bank is that while they were moving towards hybrid working for flexibility, a lot of their employees have built their infrastructure of their life around the office space. My children go here, and they were pushing back hybrid and the
Hybrid.
flexibility that seemed to be um, accepted worldwide, or
Mm,
the ones that we usually talk about. Because whenever
mm,
we talk to leaders, that is like almost a number one priority to attract talent, to retain talent. And here I was talking to two leaders who do not agree. All right. And the point and connection that I am making with Anum's question is that these two organizations are not implementing, they are slowing down because they don't think it will be sustainable for their business.
mm,
Okay, they're pausing. They're not jumping into the bandwagon that everybody is doing it, so we need to do it. All right, which then makes me think about Anup's question, that perhaps when we are talking about things like hybrid work, the reason
mm,
hybrid or work from home flexibility became very desirable for organizations is that, number one, during pandemic, work could go on. Number two,
mm,
during pandemic, they say the productivity went up, because before pandemic, even though there was a need for flexible or hybrid work, we were not so much pro. Now, as a result, we are now, I'm generalizing, we are all now saying, you know what, productivity is greater when people work from home or when they do hybrid work.
mm,
They made the undesirable, which was pre-pandemic, desirable because it works in terms of productivity.
mm,
Coming back to sustainability, we're not talking about whether we can sustain hybrid work. Can we sustain motivation? Can we sustain connection to organizational purpose? Can
mm,
we sustain collaboration? Can we sustain learning and growth that happens at workplace? Can we sustain a sense of belonging to the organization? These are problems that is now surfacing now with organization that had jumped on the bandwagon to provide work from home and stuff like that,
mm.
without thinking about the impact on the business and behaviors in the long run. So this
Yeah.
is basically just to say this model works, but in between we need to be very, very clear about our objective intention and the value that drives it, because that's what might make it sustainable or not.
Yeah.
Right. So I
And
just thought it's opposite example that I wanted to share.
example
Thank you
of
so
it.
much.
Yeah. 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 And it's also the third thing I'm going to put to that is the results that are shared, because in your example, flexibility means different things to different people. All right. So would other things mean different things to different
Mm.
people. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm keeping the influencer change framework up here as we close for today. We're going to do it a little bit differently, because usually we'll take off stuff and then we come in here, because I think this is a framework that is very, very useful. Number one, for us to start thinking about influence in a different way. That's one. Number two, it's also for me to share with you that on the 2nd of August, here in Singapore, we are having the second Leadership Learning Festival in 2024. We had the first one in April, the second one is coming up, 2nd of August. And one of the items in that morning of not just networking, but learning and influencing, we are going to look at this framework session that will be led by Ashok, and unpack how it comes across in a variety of activities that we're going to do. So if you are a leader in HR, in L&D, in whatever function, and you like to explore fluent influencing a little bit more, nicely balanced manipulation, if you want to, if I'm going to be a little bit more triggering, right? Then yeah, you know where to find me on LinkedIn. Let me know that you're interested and we'll have a chat. right? It's just a few weeks to go. So thank you for joining us today, this evening. I'm going to just pass on to Malar and Ashok if they have got final words before we wrap up for the day, because we kind of like overran a little bit.
Right. I'm just going to say, assuming that I can bring in numbers, I'll be there in Singapore, so please come.
Yes. Yes, we will all be there in Singapore. Ashok, any final words?
No final words. Thank you all very much again for sharing with us that influence is important, it's present, it has to be intentional, ethical, and let's be very conscious about how we approach influence, and let's not take it for granted. So
All
thank
right.
you very much for sharing this today.
Very nice. So thank you all. You know where to find us next week, same time, same place. Just wait for the link to be put up on LinkedIn, and we'll see you there. Bye, everyone. Good
Bye
evening.
bye.